This is Monocle on Design Extra. It's a short show to accompany our weekly programme where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and graphic design. I'm Maylie Evans. How do you bring a story to life? On stage, that's often through performers, be it actors, singers or dancers, but you might also call upon technology to help out. But production elements like lighting, sound, set, and even technology can be called upon to help out. Inter Alia, which has been playing at London's National Theatre, utilises savvy video design on stage to aid in the production's exploration of its themes of masculinity, motherhood, and identity. The production is written by Susie Miller and director Justin Martin, with video design by Willie Williams, who worked with the duo on their previous play, Prima Facie. In Inter Alia, the use of video is complex and innovative, enhancing an incredible performance by Rosamund Pike, but without distracting from the drama. To find out more about the process behind the video design, Monocle's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs sat down with Willie Williams at Midori House.
I think initially I felt like the challenge of the second play would be to differentiate it from the first one, because it's broadly around the same themes, which is the law around sexual assault. Susie was a barrister and she's married to a judge, so she's really immersed in that world. And to no one's surprise, of course, the laws around sexual assault are pretty hopeless. So I wondered how this play would find its feet as an independent piece, but it really has. It's quite a different story. The central character is a female High Court judge, and what Susie is so good at, the way she writes, you think it's about one thing, and then it turns out to be about something far more complex. So that was really the introduction to it as we started to find our way in.
How do you even start thinking about what the video design is going to be when you're working with a play? What are those kind of early conversations like?
With a play, in some ways, it's a little easier, because I also do a lot of concert touring. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about working on a play is you start with a script. You agree at the beginning that this is what we're doing and everyone's working towards the same goal, whereas concert touring can be a little vaguer. And for me personally, sometimes I will design an entire production, sometimes I'll direct, and occasionally like this I'll just do one specific piece. And I really enjoy all those different relationships to projects. It's really good for variety. And with this one, the video is a very small part of this play, as with Prima Facie. But it was really interesting on this play because I realised early on that the video would serve a few different functions. Sometimes it's very straightforward, like there's a karaoke bar and we did the bouncing ball lyrics. Sometimes it's scenic. The joy really of working with Miriam, the set designer, there's a forest upstage. There's a completely unexplained forest upstage, and she wanted to feel like it went on forever. And in the end, we managed to blend the physical scenery with the video to the point where you really couldn't tell where one finished and the next one began. And so it was very subtle. You wouldn't have looked at it and thought, ooh, that's video. And that I thought was a real triumph. But it was also clear that there were going to be places within the play where video would perform a function that I'd certainly never come across before, which was we were making material that the audience would never see, but it was simply there to provoke the actors. This is a bit of a spoiler alert, but a huge turning point in the play is when Rosamund, who plays a High Court judge who's also married with a teenage boy, so as well as being this super powerful Wonder Woman, she's a wife and mum, and juggling all of that is a huge part of the play. But she looks at her son's laptop, and of course what she sees there horrifies her. And the audience never sees what she sees. And we had a conversation about she could just act it. There were various ways that she could have approached it, but she wanted it to be real. And so we were making material to go on the laptop. And some of it was pretty challenging. The National Theatre is very good at what they call safeguarding. They make sure that everyone's okay and nobody's being pushed further than they want to go. But Rosamund really wanted to be able to respond to this material. And I think it was a first for me making video content in inverted commas that the audience would never see. But it became a very important part of the production. And similarly, the other actors, They had to be in on it. And so that was really interesting for me. I'd never really come across anything like that.
Wow, that's amazing. And you would have no idea from the audience?
No, I think from the audience, I think would assume that it was a graphic that kind of looked a bit like Snapchat. True confessions, we had to come up with her son's Snapchat comments. Mm-hmm. He's commenting on video material, and it's really not great. And of course, it's a complete surprise to the parents. You know, they're basically finding this other person they didn't know existed. The Snapchat comments, I actually got ChatGPT to generate them because it was so far out of my field of experience. And it was quite horrible, really.
Yeah, I can imagine that is a good use for ChatGPT. You don't have to dive into that too deeply. I wanted to talk more widely. As we've said, you work on plays, but you mentioned that you also do a lot of concert work. Your videos are often interacting with, or they're existing in the same world and alongside performers. And I wondered how you find the right balance between doing something that is enhancing this performance and that's adding to it, but it's not distracting, it's not taking so much away from that live element. And I wonder if that just comes completely naturally, or if it's sometimes quite tricky to find that right sweet spot.
It's always a conversation with the performer, because it's the eternal question. How do you make something that's so much bigger than the performer but doesn't distract from the performance? I was very fortunate in the late 80s, early 90s. I worked with David Bowie for 3 years. He, of course, was just the master of this. And we did one tour called Sound and Vision, which at the time was certainly physically the biggest visual space I'd worked in. And it was projection. And I learned an awful lot from the way he was confident enough to give it over to the visuals for a time. And then you can bring it back to yourself. And then I've worked with U2 since the dawn of time. We together were very early on making essentially multimedia shows for rock concerts. Zoo TV in the early 90s pretty much wrote the book for how shows still look today, actually. So we've had a lot of experience and a lot of trust and a long relationship to figure it out. And the joy, I think, with U2, the Sphere in Las Vegas, which we did the year before last, was just ridiculous. The imbalance between the size of the performers and the size of the video imagery was absurd. But there's sufficient confidence, and we're all now so used to working with this medium, it becomes a dance. And I think the joy of it is when you work with a performer who's confident enough just to let go. You know, you've got no chance of competing in inverted commas. But as long as the audience feel like everything they're seeing and hearing is coming from the performers, if the performers feel like they're in control, then it can work. Mm-hmm.
That time that you've been working there, as you mentioned, there's video and the digital world has completely changed. And I wonder if you've obviously been driving some of that change, you've been riding some of that change, I imagine. But I imagine, now you kind of reflect and look back. Does it feel like a completely different world, or is it actually, are you doing a very similar job, but the tools have just slightly, enhanced?
The job is to create emotional connection between the performer and the audience. And so in one sense, the task hasn't changed. Even with very simple lighting, you can enhance a performance in a way that brings something out of the audience. And when you've got massive pictures to work with, that can also help as well. It can also be terrible. In both cases, it can be terrible. So in a way, what I try to do, what I strive for really, is to help the audience to forget about the medium, just to lose themselves in this situation, this all-encompassing situation, and find an emotional connection with the performers. That's really always the goal. And the tools change, the tools move on, but the task always remains the same. And the more the audience can be made to forget about the process, the better, really.
Mm-hmm. And does that sometimes feel a little, I don't know what the right word is, when you've done your job amazingly, no one is necessarily thinking about the video designers and the people that have put into that. And I wonder how that feels when you've done the perfect job. It might not be as noticed as, if you've done it less well.
It's so not about me. And look, that's absolutely fine. If I'd wanted it to be about me, I'd be on the stage. No, I've long thought if an audience goes home talking about the production, then you've failed. Mm-hmm. If they're talking about the experience or what it made them feel, then you've won.
That was the video designer Willie Williams of Treatment Studio in conversation with Monocle's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs. Inter Alia is on at London's National Theatre until the 13th of September. That's all for this week. If you're eager for more design stories, then listen to our main programme, Monocle on Design, airing on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. London time. Or if you prefer print, you can pick up a copy of Monocle magazine. It's available on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced by me, Maylee Evans. Thank you very much for listening.